Hey, Pathway people. We're working on problem set lesson 9, which is about comparing distributions. You should have opened the document and copied it, and then changed the name to your last name, your first name, problem set lesson 9. Let's get into it. Number 1, always read the context. A study investigates the number of calories consumed by men in 2 age groups, males 17 to 25 and males age 50 to 60. So young men, old men. This quantity is measured in calories per day. All right, we got a couple of distributions here. As I'm looking at it, I'm noticing some things, right? I'm looking at the young men's distribution and saying that looks pretty darn symmetric, no skew. Whereas the older men's distribution, also symmetric, but I would describe it as uniform. Other things I'm noticing here is that the middle of the young men's distribution seems like it is larger than the old men's distribution. And then as far as the standard deviations go, I would say that the old men looks like it's going to be a little more spread out because there's more values on the ends far away from the middle. So do that right when you look at the graph. And then let's come down here and confirm. Yeah, sure enough, the young men, their averages are larger than the old men. Their means are greater than the older men. And then, as predicted, the standard deviation and the IQR, those are your measures of spread. I know you don't know what the IQR is yet. We'll hit that soon. The older men are larger. So now we're asked to do this. This is kind of like the big skill for today. It says, for these distributions, compare the shape, the center, and the spread. Along with comparing the statistics, we always describe what the numbers mean in their real-world context. All right, so start with shapes. And for the shape, all you need to do is name the shapes. So I would say the young men's distribution is symmetric, while, let's say, with one mode or one peak, while the old men's distribution is symmetric as well, but also uniform. All right, so there you just described the shapes. Now the centers. For the center, you have to make a choice. You have to decide whether to use the mean or the median. And since there is no skew and no outliers, we choose the mean. If there had been skew or outliers, we would go with the median. So let's see. Here are our means. I noticed that the young men's is 500 larger than the old men's. All right, so here goes our 2 sentences for describing the center. First sentence, talk about the statistics. Name the statistic we use. So we would say the mean calorie consumption for young men, I chose young men because it was larger, is 500 calories per day. Notice that I'm naming what the units are. Greater, there's our comparison, greater than for older men. What does that tell us? It tells us that on average, young men eat more than old men. Now, Klein, why do I have to use that word on average? Good question. We'll think of it this way. Does every single young man up here eat more than the old men? Definitely not. Look at this guy down here at the bottom. He's eating way less than this guy. And you like we've all got it. You've got like disgusting Uncle Larry who like comes to Thanksgiving and like leaves with his belt on like a different setting. So it's not always true. It's just true on average, or in other words, for the group. So now let's go to spread. Now for the spread, we said that the older men were larger. We have 2 measures of spread, the standard deviation, which you're familiar with, and the IQR, which you are not familiar with. We're going to use the standard deviation. Not because it's the one we're familiar with, but because it goes with the mean. So our sentence is going to go like this. The standard deviation for old men is, what is that? 422 minus 300, 122 calories per day greater than for young men. This tells us that there is more variation in the diets, I guess that's my way of saying calorie consumption, of older men versus young men. You don't have to say on average here because we're not talking about an average. We're talking about variation, how spread out things are. Okay, so I did an example. You do the rest of it. Let me mention something on our buddy number 2 here. On number 2, let's see, what is this one about? It's about male calorie consumption versus female calorie consumption. Oh, let's change that. For young people. So as I'm looking at these distributions, I see a couple of things. First, for the female group, notice that there is a definite skew to the right and an outlier. And then for the men's group down here, it looks like there could be some outliers over on the left. So they both have some issues that could bias the mean, right? We know that the mean is not resistant to skew or to outliers. So you can't use the mean. You are instead going to need to use the median. Now, if you're using the median, then you have to use the IQR as your measure of variation. Now, I know that you don't know what that means right now. By the way, when I said variation, that means the same thing as spread. Now, I'm aware that you don't know what IQR is, but just use it. We'll talk about what it means next.